June 11, 1944, Normandy. Unteroffizier Klaus Richter, 23, found himself in the shattered remains of a pillbox, his radio destroyed. The 716th Infantry Division was no more. When American GIs appeared, rifles leveled, Richter surrendered. His war was over. He was zip-tied and marched to the beach, joining thousands of German prisoners watching Allied armor roll inland. 2 days later, Richter was on a Liberty ship to America. The 11-day voyage offered him better food than he'd had in 2 years with the Wehrmacht. White bread, canned meat, coffee with real sugar. American guards bored, played cards and smoked, occasionally offering prisoners cigarettes. Richter, who'd been taught Americans were soft, observed their casual control of the ocean and their humane treatment of enemies, a stark contrast to his training. One guard, a farm boy from Iowa named Miller, spoke broken German, describing his father's dairy farm with its 300 cattle, electric milking machines, and indoor plumbing. Details Richter politely dismissed as exaggeration. Camp Grant spanned the Illinois prairie, a vast expanse of white barracks, double fences, and guard towers. Processing prisoners took 4 hours, including medical exams, delousing, and new uniforms. By May 1945, the camp held nearly 5,000 German POWs. Richter was assigned to Barrack 17 in Compound C, complete with a mattress, flush toilets, and hot showers. 3 meals a day were served in the mess hall. Evenings offered lectures, English classes, or films. Richter couldn't grasp the Americans' motivation. Germany was ruined, the Reich fallen. What was the point of comfortable POWs? The guards, mostly older men or wounded veterans, treated prisoners impersonally, as a routine job. Camp life became predictable. Daily roll calls, meals, work details, and recreational activities. Some prisoners worked on local farms, earning small wages for camp accounts or in camp workshops. Escape seemed irrelevant. Germany was across an ocean and the war winding down. In late April, Richter received letters from his mother in Hamburg detailing firebombing, starvation, and a flood of Soviet refugees. His younger brother had died in the Ardennes, and his sister worked in a British displaced persons camp, grateful for food. This stark contrast ignited a gnawing guilt. He ate well in heated barracks while his mother scavenged, and Hamburg froze. He was safe while Germany burned. The cognitive dissonance was immense. While some prisoners clung to Nazi ideology, Richter found himself in an uneasy middle ground, unable to fully accept defeat or reconcile his beliefs with obvious reality. The Americans didn't try to convert them. Camp conditions spoke for themselves. May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. Camp Grant's loudspeakers announced the news in German and English. Some prisoners wept, others sat in stunned silence, a few cheered. The guards seemed only tired. That evening, Colonel Harrison, the camp commandant, addressed the prisoners, his voice flat and official, through an interpreter. The Third Reich no longer exists. Germany is occupied by Allied forces. You will remain prisoners until repatriation can be arranged. In the meantime, you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. The recreation hall, packed with 2,000 prisoners, became the venue for an earnest re-education program. Films on American democracy, lectures on constitutional government, and newspapers showing ruined German cities were presented. Most prisoners viewed it as Allied propaganda. Richter attended out of obligation and boredom, learning about the Marshall Plan and the United Nations, but it seemed abstract, distant from his mother's reality. Then, on May 23, 1945, a notice appeared. Mandatory attendance at a special film screening that evening in the recreation hall. The tone was grim. Richter joined thousands of prisoners, the hall packed, American guards more numerous than usual. Colonel Harrison stood before the screen, waiting for silence. What you are about to see was filmed by American, British, and Soviet combat cameramen in recent weeks. It is not propaganda. It is not staged. It is documentary footage of concentration camps liberated by Allied forces in Germany, Poland, and Austria. You will watch it in its entirety. Anyone who becomes ill should use the containers provided along the walls. The lights dimmed. Images flashed across the screen. American soldiers approaching a gate, a sign, Dachau. Richter's stomach clenched. Skeletal figures, hollow-eyed, stared into cameras. Mountains of corpses, skins stretched over bone, gas chambers disguised as showers, crematoria ovens still holding remains. Allied soldiers forced SS guards to carry bodies, their faces contorted in rage. German civilians from nearby towns were marched through the camps, compelled to witness the horrors. Women fainted, men vomited. The footage continued. Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, Mauthausen, Auschwitz, Birkenau. Each camp revealed unimaginable scale, tens of thousands dead, mass graves overflowing. Survivors, emaciated beyond belief, moved through nightmarish landscapes. Medical experiments, torture chambers, children's bodies. Allied doctors desperately tried to save those too far gone. The liberation scenes depicted the raw fury of Allied soldiers, systematically documenting every atrocity for future tribunals. The reaction in the hall was visceral. Some sat frozen, faces blank, minds unable to process. Others wept openly, heads in hands. Many vomited into helmets or buckets, the sound echoing. A few shouted denials. The American guards watched, their expressions a mix of contempt and pity. A sergeant near Richter wept, hands clenched. The film showed American generals forcing local Germans to bury bodies, to confront the unspeakable. Eisenhower's face, a mask of fury, inspected Ohrdruf. A narrator detailed the systematic bureaucratic nature of the murder, train schedules, Zyklon B shipments, accounting ledgers. This was planned, industrial genocide. Documents, orders, the paper trail of atrocity were displayed. Richter recognized high-ranking SS officers from newsreels, men who had graced propaganda posters, now making hollow justifications before Allied interrogators. Just following orders, didn't know the full extent. Their excuses crumbled before the footage. The 90-minute screening ended in absolute silence. Men stared blankly, some still vomiting, others huddled forward. A few looked at the American guards with a new understanding of what they had fought against. Colonel Harrison's voice was harder now. This is what you served. This is what the Third Reich created. These camps operated with German resources, German personnel, German knowledge. The German people knew, the Wehrmacht knew, you knew. Whether you admitted it or not, this is the truth of your war. Richter felt the words like physical blows. He had known, not specifics, but he had known something terrible was happening. Whispered conversations, trains heading east, Jewish families vanishing, suppressed rumors from the Eastern Front. He had chosen not to know, accepted comfortable ignorance. The hall emptied slowly, men shuffling out in silence. Richter walked back to his barracks in darkness, images forever seared into his mind. Skeletal figures, children's bodies, mass graves, the casual efficiency of industrial murder. That night, Barracks 17 remained silent. No one spoke, no one slept. Some wept quietly, others grappled with the inescapable implications. Everything had changed. The Americans hadn't shown the footage to humiliate, but because it was true, undeniable, demanding confrontation. To send German POWs home ignorant would be a betrayal of the dead. Richter, who had pitied his mother for Hamburg's destruction, now understood Allied bombing as a response, a consequence. Germany had unleashed this horror, and the world had responded. The guilt was Germany's and his. In the following days, Camp Grant fractured. Some prisoners clung to denial, others sank into despair. Many, like Richter, entered numb processing, unable to deny what they'd seen, yet struggling to accept what it meant about themselves and their country. The re-education continued, but the concentration camp footage had achieved more than any lecture. Prisoners who once dismissed democratic ideals now understood their importance, realizing the consequences of their abandonment. The comfort of American camp life took on new meaning, a society valuing human life, treating even enemies with dignity, recoiling from the atrocities Germany had embraced. Richter began attending English classes voluntarily, reading American newspapers, and writing censored letters home, hoping some truth would reach his mother. He accepted that returning to Germany meant confronting a country that would take generations to heal. He understood the film's showing was an act of moral necessity, preventing Germans from comfortable denial. It had forced him to see the truth, giving him a foundation for a different future. The screen's undeniable horror had shattered every lie he believed about the war, his country, and himself. Now he had to live with that knowledge, carry it forward, and build something new from the ashes of his past understanding. June 14, 1945, at 07:30. Richter reports for work at Camp Grant's employment office, assigned to a tobacco farm 15 miles west. His wage slip indicates 80 cents daily, paid in camp scrip. This meager sum contrasts sharply with his family's daily 1 to 200-calorie ration in Germany. Here, American authorities pay enemy soldiers to work civilian farms, a stark difference. The transport truck carrying 12 POWs and a single guard travels Illinois' back roads. The relaxed atmosphere, no chains, no pointed rifles, strikes Werner Hoffmann, a Panzer Grenadier, who observes, "They treat us like hired hands, not prisoners." This remark resonates, knowing tales of brutal Russian camps. Americans provide cushioned seats. Edward Patterson, 63, owner of the tobacco farm, greets the POWs in broken German. His son died at Anzio just 7 months prior. Despite this, Patterson shakes each prisoner's hand, directing them to the equipment shed. At 0900, his wife, Margaret, brings sandwiches of ham, white bread, mustard and pickles, silently setting them down. Richter meticulously works the tobacco rows under the June sun, sweat soaking his American-style denim shirt. His shoulders ache by 1100. Patterson supervises, offering calm, precise corrections, treating the POWs like any hired labor. He even personally demonstrates proper technique to a slow-working Friedrich Steiner. During the noon lunch break, the POWs gather under an oak tree. Margaret Patterson returns, this time with cold lemonade and sugar cookies. Richter, tasting real butter and sugar, finds the sweetness almost painful after years of substitutes. Hoffmann, after several glasses of lemonade, haltingly asks, "Why you do this? Your son?" Margaret pauses before responding, "Because you're here, because you're hungry, because that's what we do." She returns to the house, leaving the POWs in stunned silence. This woman, who lost her son fighting their army, offers them real cookies. Richter recalls propaganda portraying Americans as soft and weak. He surveys the prosperous Patterson farm, 200 acres, modern equipment, a large house, a barn bigger than 3 German farmhouses. The words soft, weak now taste like ash. Work continues until 1700. Patterson pays each man in camp scrip. Richter holds 8 pieces of paper, a day's wages, representing genuine purchasing power, unlike the German mark. The truck returns them to Camp Grant by 1800 for evening mess. After dinner, Richter explores the camp canteen, filled with items unseen for years: Hershey's Baby Ruth, Lucky Strike, real soap, actual toothpaste. Magazines like Life and Time display unbombed American cities and thriving families. He buys a Hershey bar and a Life magazine, spending 15 cents, with 65 remaining. In the barracks, Richter opens Life to an April 1945 photo essay of American teenagers laughing and drinking milkshakes at a soda fountain. The contrast with Berlin's destruction and Russian advance is jarring. Propaganda had depicted a suffering America. These photos show a nation untouched by war on its own soil. Hoffmann dismisses it as propaganda, but the conviction is absent. The daily evidence, well-made uniforms, abundant gasoline, endless food, indicates a functioning continent. America fights a two-ocean war, supports allies, feeds prisoners, yet still has milkshakes for its teenagers. Evening recreation starts at 1900 with Yankee Doodle Dandy. 200 German POWs watch James Cagney tap dance, celebrating American patriotism. The film, made in 1942 when Germany dominated Europe, showcases American wealth, confidence, and industrial capacity for elaborate entertainment, a stark contrast to grainy German newsreels of distant battlefields. Back in the barracks, a heated argument erupts. Otto Becker, a staunch Nazi, claims the American abundance is fabricated to break their spirit. Hoffman refutes him, describing the real farm, real soil, real food, and the cookies from Margaret Patterson. "You explain how they fake an entire continent," he challenges. Becker, red-faced, insists they starve their own people for this illusion. Yet other POWs confirm the pervasive American prosperity seen in their work assignments: civilian cars, full stores, healthy children. Carl Brandt from his bunk adds, "I drove through Rockford last week. Factories at full capacity, housing being built, department stores with 20 types of shoes. Nobody hungry, nobody afraid. That is not staged, Otto. That is a nation that won the war before it started because we never understood what we faced." The conversation turns to letters from home. Richter rereads 3 from his mother in Bavaria, written in March but just arrived. She details destruction, their apartment damaged, his father's factory destroyed, rations cut, women scavenging for potatoes, children begging American soldiers for chocolate. The German mark is worthless. Wedding rings are traded for bread. She doesn't ask when he'll return, only if he has enough food. Richter surveys his comfortable barracks. Bed, blankets, footlocker, electric lights, hot showers, twice-weekly movies, and the canteen's luxuries. 3 full meals daily with meat and 80 cents a day for farm work. His mother digs for potatoes. He eats ham sandwiches made by a woman whose son he may have killed. Sunday morning, June 15th, Richter attends Catholic services, led by Father Brennan, an American priest speaking German. Father Brennan addresses guilt, responsibility, and redemption, mentioning the concentration camp footage. "Now you know. What will you do with that knowledge? Deny it? Excuse it? Or accept the terrible truth and never permit such evil again?" Afterward, Richter asks him, "How do we live with this? How do we face our families?" Brennan responds, "By acknowledging it, by refusing to forget, by teaching your children the truth. You don't escape the guilt, Klaus, but you choose what comes next." Monday's assignment is a furniture factory in Rockford, managed by Sam Cohen, a Jewish man whose brother died at Buchenwald. Cohen, aware they are German, assigns them sanding and finishing work. Richter, unable to reconcile this, asks in broken English, "Why you give us work? Your brother." Cohen replies, "Because you're not in charge anymore. We are, and we choose to show you what civilization looks like. You can have enemies without becoming monsters. Maybe you'll remember that." These words, more impactful than any propaganda, demonstrate a different path. The Americans don't brutalize. They show an alternative through direct action, a lesson deeper than any punishment. That evening, Richter writes his first honest letter home. He describes the food, work, wages, and American treatment. He speaks of the concentration camp footage, acknowledging undeniable evidence. He writes that everything they were taught was a lie, that Germany's regime committed incomprehensible crimes, expressing profound shame. He knows censors will read it, but prioritizes the truth. Hoffman sits beside him. War ends soon. What happens to us? Richter has no answer. Repatriation to a ruined Germany or continued re-education. Either way, they carry home the knowledge of what was done and how the victors chose to respond. The next day, News of the Nuremberg trials announces justice for Nazi leaders. Richter reads the names, realizing the Nazi edifice has crumbled to horror and ash. He sees a historical crossroads: cling to lies or accept the truth and move forward. The Americans have shown them abundance, dignity, civilization. The choice of what to do with these lessons rests with the prisoners. In August 1946, Klaus Richter, a German prisoner of war, sailed from Hampton Roads aboard the USS General W.P. Richardson, bound for Bremerhaven. He was one of 4,172 German POWs returning home, a journey marked by profound ambivalence. Unlike the confident U-boat crews of 1940, these men watched the American coastline recede, their futures uncertain. Richter carried a notebook documenting concentration camp footage, determined that the horrors he witnessed wouldn't be dismissed as fabrication. The 11-day journey was calm, but the returning soldiers' minds churned with anxieties about their defeated homeland. Upon arrival in Bremerhaven on August 28, 1946, Richter was stunned by the city's devastation, comparable to the concentration camp films. Allied bombing had destroyed 70% of Bremerhaven's infrastructure, leaving skeletal buildings as stark monuments to defeat. Over 2 days at the repatriation center, American and British officials screened for war criminals and conducted denazification interviews. Richter, a conscripted radio operator with no party affiliation beyond mandatory Hitler Youth membership, passed swiftly. He received discharge papers, 75 Reichsmarks, a ration card, and orders to report to Hamburg authorities within 2 weeks. The train journey to Hamburg, normally hours, became a 2-day ordeal due to destroyed tracks and occupation zone chaos. Richter, in freight cars with other POWs and displaced persons, witnessed a Germany unrecognizable. Cities were vast fields of rubble, with survivors creating trench-like paths through debris and children playing in bombed basements. The contrast with American abundance was stark. While Camp Grant offered daily meat, fresh bread and milk, Richter's ration card provided only 1,150 calories daily, far below subsistence. The black market, he quickly learned, had become Germany's true economy. Hamburg was even more devastated. The 1943 Operation Gomorrah firebombing had killed 37,000 civilians and destroyed 61% of residential areas. Richter's family apartment building in Barmbek was a mountain of rubble. Through a displaced persons center, he found his mother and younger sister sharing 2 rooms with 3 other families in Altona. His father, a merchant marine engineer, had died in 1942 when his ship was torpedoed. His older brother, last known fighting on the Eastern Front, was missing and presumed dead or captured by Soviets. The reunion, though joyful, was tinged with profound loss. That evening, when his mother asked about his American experience, Richter described the adequate food, fair treatment, and work programs. Then he mentioned the films. His mother's reaction was immediate and defensive, claiming the concentration camps were Allied fabrications to justify bombing German cities. Richter had anticipated this, having observed similar sentiments among returning Wehrmacht soldiers. He opened his notebook and read details. Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, documentary footage, German Guard testimonies, the overwhelming evidence. His sister listened silently, tears welling. His mother argued images were exaggerated, that all sides committed wartime atrocities, and that Hamburg's bombing was a war crime. Richter responded quietly, without anger, reiterating what he had seen firsthand at Camp Grant in January 1945, film shot by Allied cameramen, confirmed by countless sources. He refused to deny or dismiss it. This quiet insistence, repeated over months, became his resistance to collective amnesia. In September 1946, Richter registered with occupation authorities and enrolled in an 18-month electrician vocational program established by the British. Hamburg desperately needed electricians for reconstruction, restoring power grids destroyed by bombing and neglect. Richter, adept at radio equipment during his Wehrmacht service, excelled in civilian electrical systems. By early 1948, he worked for a rebuilding contractor, spending 3 years rewiring damaged apartment buildings and installing systems in reconstructed factories. The work was steady, pay modest but reliable, providing purpose amid overwhelming physical reconstruction. In 1950, Richter married Ingrid Holstermann, a widow whose first husband died at Stalingrad. She worked as a secretary for the British Occupation Administration, fluent in English from pre-war language studies. They met at a reconstruction site where she handled documentation. Ingrid had also lost family in the war, a brother in North Africa, and parents during the Hamburg firebombing. Their marriage, like thousands post-war, symbolized rebuilding from total destruction. They had a son in 1951 and a daughter in 1954. Richter rarely discussed his POW experience with colleagues, but spoke openly with his children about the concentration camp films, wanting them to understand that denial and silence enabled catastrophe. During West Germany's Wirtschaftswunder, economic miracle, of the 1950s and 60s, Richter remained a steady electrician, opening his own commercial electrical contracting business in 1962, employing 6 workers. He led a quiet life, attending Lutheran services, joining neighborhood associations, and voting. However, when discussions turned to the Nazi period, which became more open in the 1960s, Richter consistently challenged revisionism. To former neighbors claiming ignorance of concentration camps, he countered that evidence was available. Many simply chose not to see. While acknowledging the horror of Allied bombing, he refused to let it deflect from German crimes. This stance drew criticism from his generation, but earned respect from younger Germans confronting their nation's history. Richter attended a documented reunion in Hamburg in 1968, an informal gathering of German POWs from American camps. Unlike Wehrmacht unit reunions often steeped in nostalgia, this one maintained a different tone. Many spoke of cultural shock, the abundance of American camps contrasting with wartime Germany's privation, and especially the impact of seeing concentration camp footage. Several, like Richter, described how the films fundamentally altered their understanding of what they had fought for. Organizers recognized this generation of POWs played a significant role in Germany's post-war reckoning, providing first-hand testimony outside the propaganda bubble, validating the irrefutable evidence shown by Americans. Richter retired in 1978, handing his business to his son. He passed away in Hamburg in 1989 at 68, months before the fall of the Berlin Wall. His obituary briefly mentioned his POW experience and reconstruction work. At his funeral, his daughter read from his notebook detailing his experience watching the footage at Camp Grant. She later donated the notebook to Hamburg's Institut für die Geschichte der deutschen Juden, where it resides in their oral history collection. Klaus Richter's experience, shared by hundreds of thousands of German POWs in American camps between 1943 and 1946, significantly impacted post-war Germany's confrontation with Nazi crimes. America's mandatory viewing policy of concentration camp footage, spanning over 500 POW camps, was an unprecedented attempt at mass psychological denazification. While historians debate its immediate effectiveness, it undeniably created a cohort of Germans who returned home with first-hand knowledge that Allied accusations were not exaggerated propaganda. The US military government's Information Control Division continued this policy post-war, making concentration camp footage mandatory for German civilians in the American occupation zone, screened in local cinemas. Between 1945 and 1947, around 8 million Germans attended. However, POWs like Richter, who saw the films much earlier, served as crucial advance witnesses. Their testimony held particular weight because they viewed the evidence in America free from accusations of duress under occupation. The American POW system itself, adhering to Geneva Convention standards, providing adequate food, medical care, and fair treatment, was another form of education. German prisoners, indoctrinated to believe Americans were weak and decadent, instead encountered a nation of immense industrial power and genuine democratic principles. The cognitive dissonance between Nazi propaganda and observed reality opened avenues for reconsidering other propaganda claims. The concentration camp films, presented in this context of humane treatment, gained additional persuasive power. Had POWs been treated brutally, the films could have been dismissed as victors' propaganda. Instead, they forced German prisoners to confront undeniable evidence. Academic studies like Werner Solor's on German prisoners in America and Arnold Kramer's Nazi prisoners of war in America document extensive interviews with former POWs who described the concentration camp screenings as transformative. Many initially disbelieved the footage, assuming it was elaborate American propaganda. Yet the sheer volume of evidence, testimonies from German guards, and visual documentation overwhelmed their denial. Kramer estimates that while a minority of ideological Nazis remained unmoved, 60 to 70% of German POWs accepted the existence and documented scale of the concentration camps. Screening this footage also shaped Allied policy on confronting war crimes. The Nuremberg trials, beginning in November 1945, heavily utilized documentary film, including expanded footage of camp liberations. Prosecutors understood the persuasive power of visual evidence over written testimony. The precedent of showing POWs this footage demonstrated its effectiveness, justifying its use in judicial proceedings. This established documentary evidence as central to war crimes prosecution, a practice continuing in international tribunals today. The stark contrast between German POW experiences in American versus Soviet captivity also influenced post-war German memory and political alignment. While roughly 380,000 German prisoners in American camps mostly returned by 1946, approximately 3 million captured by Soviet forces faced minimal food, brutal labor, and high mortality. The last German POWs didn't return from Soviet captivity until 1956, over a decade after the war. This contrast reinforced Western democratic values among returning POWs and solidified West Germany's alignment with the Atlantic Alliance during the Cold War. Modern German educational programs on the Holocaust and Nazi crimes directly reference the American POW screening program. Museums and memorial sites, such as the Documentation Center Nazi Party Rally Grounds in Nuremberg and the House of the Wannsee Conference Memorial, include exhibits on how Germans learned of concentration camp atrocities through Allied documentation and forced viewing. This policy of confronting perpetrators and bystanders with visual evidence of crimes set a precedent for transitional justice, influencing truth and reconciliation processes in later conflicts from South Africa to Bosnia and Rwanda. The forced viewing of atrocity footage raises complex ethical questions still debated by historians. Some argue mandatory screenings constituted psychological manipulation, violating informed consent. Others contend that given unprecedented crimes, extraordinary educational and confrontational measures were justified. It's clear the policy was a conscious effort to prevent the denial prevalent in Germany after WWI, when many believed reports of atrocities were exaggerated Allied propaganda. American officials were determined Germans would not deny concentration camps as they had earlier war crimes. Klaus Richter's experience illustrates how individual Germans processed this confrontation with evidence. His transformation from a young radio operator believing Wehrmacht propaganda to a man decades later quietly insisting on historical truth reflects a broader, albeit uneven and incomplete, societal transformation in Germany. The shock delivered in an Illinois cinema in January 1945 resonated through post-war Germany via thousands of returning POWs who carried home not just memories but documented undeniable evidence. Their insistence on truth, often quiet and private like Richter's, contributed to Germany's eventual ongoing confrontation with its past. America's decision to expose German prisoners to the full horror of their nation's actions was an unprecedented experiment in moral education, whose legacy continues to shape how societies confront atrocity and historical truth.